dominated global headlines over the course of the last week. There is chaos and anarchy on the streets of Sri Lanka. There are also clarion calls from some very angry protesters and opposition members alike for Gotabaya Rajapaksa to tender his resignation. But what is interesting is that the president may have fled from his palace. He also fled from the country in a very ignominious manner. But there's still no sign of a resignation from President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. As of the 13th of July, Wednesday, as the day passed by, the day when Gotabaya Rajapaksa had promised to resign, the opposition targeted the ruling Sri Lankan Podujana Peramuna party. The main opposition party, the Samaji Jana Balavega, accused Gotabaya and also the Assembly Speaker and the Prime Minister of lying to the people of Sri Lanka about the president stepping down from his office. And this, of course, comes after thousands of protesters stormed the Prime Minister's office on Wednesday, with slogans being raised against the government and also demanding Gotabaya Rajapaksa to immediately resign because he's no longer in the country now. The Sri Lankan police resorted to using tear gas in a bid to try and disperse the protesting crowd. The protesters were furious over the emergency that was imposed in the country after its president was forced to flee to Maldives. Now, later in the day, the agitators also protested near the Assembly Speaker's residence, which is close to the Lankan Parliament. The police resorted to firing tear gas and also used water cannons in order to stop the angry mob. Now, what is interesting is that looking at the state of affairs in terms of the manner in which the mob has now effectively taken over the country, the newly appointed acting president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, has ordered for the security forces to protect the parliament and also to restore order. A curfew has now been imposed in the country till Thursday morning to take control of the situation, after the protesters also stormed the streets of Colombo. Now, Sri Lanka, of course, continues to witness both political and economic turmoil with exhausted foreign reserves and absolutely no money to import even essential commodities such as food, medicines and fuel. And now to give us more updates in terms of what's actually unfolding in Sri Lanka at this point of time, we're joined in by our correspondent Dasauni Athauda, who's been tracking the developments as the story unfolds on the ground in the country. Dasauni, good morning to you. This of course is a very crucial moment in the politics of Sri Lanka at this point of time. Give us a sense of what's unfolding this morning, especially in the aftermath of Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's now asked the security forces to try and bring the situation in the country under control.
Good morning, Saleh. Yes, like you mentioned, these are quite important times here for Sri Lanka's political future, because what transpired yesterday, we did see there were tensions that broke out in two locations. The first, during the afternoon hours yesterday, was right outside the office of the Prime Minister, and towards late evening, there were tensions and clashes that were reported near the Parliament premises and the roads surrounding it. But as of right now, things have returned back to normal. There are no clashes that were reported as of this morning. The Presidential Secretariat is right behind me, and compared to yesterday, there is a significant drop of citizens and protesters who've come to this location as well. But the focus still remains on at what point will the Speaker of Sri Lanka be announcing that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has officially resigned? Because in order for this resignation to be effective, this letter has to be formally given to the Speaker himself. And earlier on in the morning, the Speaker himself also confirmed that he is yet to receive this letter as well. Nevertheless, now Sri Lanka at this very moment has an acting president, and that would be Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has now been elevated to the post of acting president.
Absolutely indeed. Now, this of course, is the crux of the entire situation that is unfolding. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is no longer in Sri Lanka. He's fled from the country, but interestingly, he's still not resigned from his post. Do we know why has he not tendered his resignation yet?
Well, as per multiple reports, it is evident that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who fled from Sri Lanka to the Maldives, is expected to move away from the Maldives to another destination. Now, that destination also still remains to be pretty much up in the air. But the theory so far is that the letter of resignation will only come to the Speaker and it will only be made official after the President reaches his final destination, which only means that as of right now, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is yet to arrive at this so-called final destination.
Right, and also, considering that Ranil Wickremesinghe is now the acting president who is in charge of affairs in Sri Lanka, but the fact, Dasani, is that the people who are out on the streets, people who've been putting up with the chronic food and fuel shortages, they have no confidence even in the leadership of Ranil Wickremesinghe. How long will this situation of Ranil Wickremesinghe continuing as the acting president last? Because the protesters simply don't want him to continue.
Absolutely, Sal. It's quite a precarious situation given that even yesterday, just as the Speaker made the announcement that Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe will now be acting in his capacity as the acting president, the people were quite strong enough to voice their opposition and dissent, demanding for the Prime Minister also to step down. So it is interesting really to see how the citizens of Sri Lanka are rather protesting for both the President and the Prime Minister to step down simultaneously as well. So given the fact that the Prime Minister has now been elevated to the post of acting president, the people's anger and frustration still remains to be the same, which brings about the question as to who really can pacify the people of Sri Lanka as of right now.
Absolutely, indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Dasani Athada, for joining us from Colombo and getting us all those updates. We'll, of course, come back to you as more details emerge in this story. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.